The Era of Ruin has given us some absolutely banger stories and incredible new lore, and the short story Homebound is no exception. Following the tale of Ilya Revalian, a Departamento Munitorum attaché to the White Scars after the Horus Heresy is ended and the Siege of Terra broken, in the wake of the death of Horus and the interment on the Golden Throne of the Master of Mankind, we get some really tasty treats and amazing bits of lore in this one. And while this story follows the close personal friend of Jagatai Khan, the one who demanded that his dying body be taken from the field and rushed to Malcador as quickly as possible, it is the tidbits about the fates of the Primarchs that stand out the most in this story. It starts out with her receiving the news that Jagatai Khan yet lives, which is incredible considering the fact that the last time she saw him, he was broken, shattered, ran through, literally impaled, and as broken as a Primarch can be. But the Khan has a will that is absolutely indomitable. And despite his brother Mortarion impaling him upon his sewage-covered scythe, and despite being broken in body, he managed to destroy his brother, the fell Lord of Death himself, master of the 14th Legion, the Death Guard. At least his physical form. And using the move that King Arthur Pendragon uses in the movie Excalibur when his demon-possessed son/mortal enemy, Mordred, impales him. Just like Arthur pulled himself down the shaft of Mordred's spear to cleave his enemy with his last strength, so too did Khan. And we get confirmation in this story that Jagatai Khan did indeed die. He walked the paths of the dead, and he traveled throughout the warp. He wanted to be there, because above all things, Jagatai wanted to see his brother. No, not Sanguinius, who had actually manipulated him and they didn't get along. I mean Horus Lupercal. Khan was looking for Horus in the warp. And when he's talking to Ilya Revalian, he's basically in an iron lung, split open, just a mess. She states that the only thing that made it seem like he wasn't a corpse was that he spoke. He's absolutely wrecked, and he tells her of his death and how he's not the same man who came back from the other side as the one who died. He tells her of his immeasurable sorrow at the realization that Horus was destroyed. And this is the first of the massive reveals in this story. We get to hear Jagatai Khan opine about the death of his brother and best friend. Even though Khan was on the opposite side as Horus, he was still his brother, and the Khan mourned his loss, grieving heavily. Khan surprised Ilya with this. It was revelatory to her. After everything Horus had put the galaxy through, after everything that the Khan had fought and even died for, he still had love for his brother? It was confusing for her, yet also touching. So Khan let us know that Horus was destroyed. And by destroyed, I mean completely erased from existence, like in the old lore. People who clutched their pearls over the Emperor telling his favored son that he would see him again one day, and it not explicitly stating that his soul was eradicated along with his body, are in for a treat, as we now know that 100% that Jagatai was dead, and Horus was not there with him in the realm of the dead. Horus does not exist in the warp at all. He's unmade. Not just killed, he's gone and irretrievable, forever destroyed, mind, body, and soul. Horus Lupercal's loss seems to be something that Jagatai Khan would be able to accept, were it only a loss of body. But Khan is truly lamenting because he has been to the other side. He knows the true nature of the Primarchs. He knows what he is, what Big E really is. He knows it all. And he knows Horus was manipulated and was actually a pretty good dude deep down, originally. Ilya is just shocked at these revelations, and she knows that it is the last time that she's going to see Jagatai Khan again in her life, as she's getting old and run down and on her last leg. Like she's ready to just lay down and die of exhaustion after the Lionsgate spaceport and the Hegemon, after all the events of the Chondax campaign. She just wants to go lay down and die. And that's when she's summoned to meet with the Khan, who's basically so out of it he doesn't even remember Tagutai Yasuge at first. His mind is almost as shattered as his body. So Ilya Revalian goes into the heart of Eurasia to her home, where she's from, many, many miles from the Imperial Palace. It's a place of utter desolation now, as no part of Terra was untouched by the heresy. The entire region is a war-torn hellhole outside of the palace where the traitors were. And there were said to be roving war bands of Emperor's children throughout the land who were unable to escape off-world. For that matter, they're in an information blackout almost at this point, It's rumored that Big E lives. It's rumored that he died. It's rumored he was wounded. It's rumored that Horus died, that he fled, that he's coming back, etc. Nobody knows anything at this point, and it would be many months before information was stable and secure, and the legions and people serving them like Ilya would really know what was true and what was just rumor. So she doesn't really know what she's walking into. One white scar goes with her, an old friend of hers, Sojik Khan, who had survived fighting alone outside the Lionsgate spaceport against traitors, demons, and then the crazed Blood Angels who had fallen to the Black Rage. He was her adjutant during the siege, and so it was he that the Khagan sent with Ilya. And the Legionnaire knows little more than Ilya, as far as if the Emperor lived or not, if Guilliman had made it to Terra, etc. They go through a district where there was still standing Titans, smoldering and headless, a veritable legion of them, as if some great weapon had decapitated them all in one go. And there was a wreck of an enormous ship, smashed right into a district of the Imperial Palace. They wander through the wasteland and finally come to her family home. And the town is empty. There's nobody. Ilya slowly deteriorates, growing so feeble that she can barely get out of bed. But Sojik Khan stays with her. It's his Primarch's wish. He feeds her and gets water for her. Then as she grows more old and more feeble, the next big revelation that this story holds comes to light. Ilya Revalian lets Sojik know that the Primarchs are going to vie for power, and in doing so they are going to steer the ship into an iceberg essentially, as neither the Lion nor the Wolf King want anything to do with leading the Imperium. Lion's too busy with his own world's intrigues, and the Wolf is too disinterested. She says that Guilliman is going to take power, and it is in his nature to do so as he's an empire builder, a logistician, and a tactician unlike the others. A man after her own mind, she says. It leads to the revelation that the White Scars are not free to go back to Chagoris, as Sojik assumed they would be bound for, but instead will be tied to Terra, as one of the only surviving legions. The collective Imperium, which is of that point included multiple other Primarchs, would need them to stay to ensure Terra's security. And most notably, she states that not all Primarchs are truly equals, and basically lets us know that even though the Khan is the man for the job, Guilliman is the type of guy who will assume that he himself is, and this will lead to misfortune. Ilya wants Sojik to see the predicament he, his legion, and his Primarch are in. And one day while he's out getting water, which is scarce as it is basically a post-apocalyptic wasteland, an Emperor's Children Legionnaire slips into the house, intent on devouring her. He claims she shouldn't be there as he'd come through months earlier and eaten everyone, but she told him to get out of her house and to piss off. He was just about to eat her when Sojik comes flying through the door and tackles the twisted abomination of the Third Legion. Sojik cannot win, she notes, and so Ilya grabs up a knife that she's never wielded, never even unsheathed, made by the greatest ever blade master of the White Scars and given to her as a token of their esteem and honor, something which embarrassed her to no end and she felt was also far above anything she deserved, as they are Astartes and she's a human. She considers them as far above her as the gods themselves in her mind. And so she stabs the Emperor's Children Marine in the back, right into his spine with the blade, and it allows Sojik to prevail. It isn't much longer until Ilya Revalian dies, but before she does, she reminds Sojik of what she said about Guilliman before, so that he may take it back to the Khagan. Her last counsel to the man she esteemed above all others. And it is pretty deep and is sad when she dies, but before she goes, they consider how badass it was that she, a regular unaugmented human, killed a space marine. Sojik is truly impressed, and Ilya knows what kind of feat she's pulled off. So Sojik tells her that she's drawn blood for them and is now a blooded member of the Legion, a true White Scar. He means it too. That's what kind of high regard the entirety of the 5th Legion holds her in. So Ilya Revalian may not be a true female space marine, but she sure is an honorary White Scar, which shows that in their culture, that may transcend even simply just being an Astartes. Sojek reminds her that she is loved by the Legion and the Imperium, and her name will never be forgotten. And she gives him tons of data on the early days of the 5th Legion and their founding. He buries Ilya in her own fashion when she dies, as she wanted to come home to Terra, and let him know that she wanted him to say thank you to the Kagan, as he allowed her to come home. Sojek would have left her under the sky where she Chigorian, but with her emphasis on returning home, he made sure to honor her in the way of Terrans, by burial. So, we know that Horus's soul was absolutely obliterated and he'll never come back. We can put that to rest. And we know that Khan was fully dead, and what he came back as is not the same. We have yet to fully see what kind of effect this will have on him long term, but he definitely has warp-based trauma, and will need tons of physical therapy and staples to get his guts back in. It will be interesting to see what kind of state his mind is in after his afterlife experience, his loneliness and sorrow at the loss of Horus, and how he'll feel about his father after being dead and in the warp. I find it really telling that Guilliman is not the right guy and Khan is. Guilliman seems like he's trying to do the right thing, but he's holding on way too tight. The guy who pets the bunny too hard and ends up killing it. I for one love that Horus is confirmed gone. I love that we can put the theory of his return to rest. It's awesome that the Emperor told Horus he'd see him again, and "I forgive you, son," before obliterating him. It's actually really nice of him, considering he let go of his compassion to face Horus in the first place. He really must have loved the 16th Primarch, maybe even almost like an actual son. But one thing we can take away from this story, and what Ilya Revalian had to say, is that on many levels the Primarchs are the same, or many of them are. So in her mind, Guilliman is just the next Horus waiting to happen. But there's one who stands above all that petty Game of Thrones drama, and that's the Khan. If any one of the 21 Primarchs was truly an heir to their creator, then it would be Khan. He's the natural, the emperor in waiting that can sit the throne and rule after his father. And not the golden throne, literally, not saying that or anything, but the imperial seat of power. He could be the acting regent and do it well. For Khan isn't the barbarian that Guilliman makes him out to be. But one thing's for sure, I bet during his afterlife experience in the warp, the great Khan's dream was that he was a jade dragon emperor of a far-off exotic realm, in a forgotten time, a place maybe called Cathay. Ahriman knows the moment that Horus is slain by the Emperor of Mankind aboard the Vengeful Spirit. The shockwave from the implosion of psychic energy released by the death of the War Master tears across Terra, across the solar system, across space-time, and across the warp itself. From the new short story Acts Libris by John French in the Era of Ruin compilation that finalizes the Horus Heresy, we see the moment the heresy ends and the dawn of a new age. And indeed, the ages of mankind themselves are front and center in this story, featuring heavily throughout the themes and tropes. And by the end of this short but extremely revealing story, Ozzik Ahriman has taken his very first step into the new era, out of the Age of Darkness and into the Era of Ruin. But before he takes that step, the greatest mortal psyker humanity has ever produced, arguably and according to Ahriman himself, is met by the Emperor of Mankind himself, or a facsimile of him, even as a tsunami of psychic backlash poured over all of Terra. And when the Emperor fought Horus aboard the Vengeful Spirit, the Chaos Gods had poured much more of their own power than was truly wise into their champion, Horus Lupercal. And when the Emperor delivered the coup de grace, the final death blow, and erased Horus from physical reality, melting his eyeballs out and leaving a smoking husk on the deck, something great and terrible happened. An implosion. For all that power that the Big Four had poured into the Lupercal was lost, and it didn't so much send a shockwave out like an explosion, but was described as leaving an empty void in the wake of the psychic space that Horus had occupied. An empty void that was sucking everything into it as a black hole does, like when an earthquake causes all the water at the beach to suck out to sea. The Imperium itself, which had all but merged with the solar system, pulled away, leaving humanity like so many flopping fish on the ocean floor, waiting for the water to return. A psychic black hole essentially consumed the warp around Terra. The vengeful spirit, the inevitable city, and the Imperial Palace had all merged in the warp, and were becoming one thing in many ways as they were accessible from each other. And that shatters. Ahriman is in the Secret Archives, Collection 888, under the Halls of Leng, a nod to Lovecraft, by the way. He's already met with Kirill Sinderman, and we saw in The End and the Death, he's read the tarot several times over. And Ahriman knew that the future he's being foretold is true, and yet it is contrary to many things that he had assumed. Ahriman was expecting certain outcomes in the cards, but the outcome is always the same. He keeps drawing the card Demon, and he knows that the Emperor is the one destined to become the Dark King, not Horus. And then he feels it, like a tsunami of psychic storms washing over him, and knows immediately that both Horus is dead, defeated, gone from this plane of existence, and that the Emperor is going to become the Dark King. And the galaxy as he's known it up to that moment is forever gone, and a new era of decay, decline, and ruination is upon mankind. The library is basically trying to tear itself apart as it spasms from warp ripples, essentially. Ahriman is there trying to secure secret knowledge from humanity's most occult library before the other chaos forces come and belligerently destroy it all. And he's watching as the warp does that for them first, consuming knowledge like a fire tearing through the library. Everything is upside down. Every moment, every thought are one, and Ahriman realizes that he's caught in an eternity in a single moment. And anyone else would have gone insane. It was like he's a bobber floating on the surface of an ocean. He is that insignificant compared to the psychic forces unleashed all around him. He's at ground zero for the detonation of the most powerful unleashing of arcane power the galaxy had possibly ever seen. And any lesser being would not have withstood being in the eye of the cyclone. But Ahriman is composed of a different sort of metal than most. He comes across a demon that by its description is a great unclean one, and it is going for a couple of humans who are cowering from it behind some rubble, as the palace is starting to crumble in places and the earth seems to be quaking, both physically and psychically. And the implosion hits it just as it is reaching a massive clawed talon toward them, and it just disintegrates into ash. The people live, but Ahriman notes that it probably won't be for long, and if it is, then they'll be so scarred by the experience of meeting the demonic face to face that they'll never be without the moment they lived through, never able to shake it. So Osric Ahriman sees the inevitability, sees the future, what the Imperium will become. Everything which the Legiones Astartes of the Great Crusade fought against. It will become that, and more. But first Ahriman needs to get away from the epicenter of the storm, away from ground zero of the blast, which echoed throughout Terra, the Imperial Palace, the entire solar system, the warp, webway, and inevitable city. He's trying to leave the library as it is on fire and crumbling, the knowledge itself turning to dust, ash, and smoke as scrolls and wax cylinders, parchments, and data pads melt, burn, and disintegrate. And Ahriman has to will himself to live, to move, to exist, as he's a psychic being, and the warp is trying to pull him in with the ebbing tide, out to sea, into the abyss. But he sees the door. He's headed out of the Library of Leng, and the shape of reality is warping, the walls growing closer and further away at the same time as the warp's grip on Terra goes into a death spasm, surging to fill the void that was Horus Lupercal. And before Ahriman can get to the exit, before he can pass the gate, he's met with an extraordinary situation. As the books and data slates of the library start bursting into multicolored flame, and the flames are coalescing into figures from the stories in them, forming images from the dreams and imaginations of the writers who wrote them. And this is some of the oldest knowledge possessed by humanity at this point. Like your iPad is literally there, along with ancient Egyptian parchments and scrolls, probably even Sumerian cuneiform. And one of the figures coalesces into a figure from humanity's distant past, a ghost wearing the robes of an ancient empire, and he is beckoning Ahriman forward. He has a face of rippling blue flame and holes for eyes. He stands before the shrieking shades of the underworld. Pretty much seems like this is Hades, in my opinion. And the figure reaches out a hand to Ahriman and says,
"If from this savage place thou wouldst escape."
Before a coiling serpent man dragon thing appears and asks,
"What beast hath caused this abominable void, this soul-shattering vacuum?"
Then the stone feet of a dead and proud king stand in a blink of sparks, the darkness around him a desolation. And he says,
"Look on my works and despair."
With only a few feet to the door, Ahriman knows he can make it, and through the door is the other side. He'll be entering reality, and time once again. We'll be walking upon Terra, in whatever new age the ruination caused by the death of Horus allows. He acknowledges that Horus and the Emperor were two sides of the same coin, and he agreed with neither of them. As much work and dirt as he put in for both of them, he's his own man. They both, in his eyes, wanted the death of knowledge to be the end-all be-all of knowledge, and to only let new knowledge come and go through them. One of the most telling moments and visions Ahriman has is one of what is basically the tarot card, the Tower. And he's seeing the card, and two figures falling from the tower as it gets struck by lightning. He realizes that both Horus and the Emperor were bad for humanity, and that they were neither one able to look at the consequences of what they were doing, only able to look up at the heights as they climbed the tower, never down at the fall. And that is sad, as they both inevitably fell. Ahriman is basically the opposite of both of them, in that he wants to preserve knowledge, to have mankind live outside of ignorance and tyranny, and he has to strive to live through what they wrought in their arrogance. But live he does, though for most of the story he's uncertain if he will. It is only when he decides that he must live for his brothers that he does. It is Ahriman's will to live, to find a way to heal the flesh change that drives him to persist, even though his soul is being shredded by a hurricane of razor blades trying to tear him down to nothing more than dust. And then he makes it to the door, and on the other side lands back in reality, in the moment after, and falls to his knees, breathing in deep, taking the first breath of the Aeon of Horus, of the New Age, the era of ruin. For Ahriman is more real with himself than just about anyone else in Warhammer, and is not in denial. He knows one thing above all, after it is all said and done. Horus won. He might have died, his armies might have been lost. He didn't take the throne and sit as Lord of the Imperium, the new Emperor. But he did throw everything the Emperor spent so many millennia building into absolute ruin. Big E might have slain Horus, but Horus slayed his dream, his work, his vision. And Ahriman knows that the age humanity just entered into is going to be a long, arduous grind, a road nobody wants to travel, and it leads only to despair and suffering, a grimdark future where there is no respite, only war. If anyone actually grasps the magnitude of what happened, it is Isaac Ahriman, and if anyone has the will to figure out how it might be fixed, it is him. What could the chief librarian of the Thousand Sons achieve were he to gain access to the Black Library? It would be ironic if one so blessed by Tzeentch would be the one to figure out how to save mankind, but this is the Grimdark, and that would indeed be quite fitting. Don't pass on this one, folks. It is very, very interesting indeed. So the Custodes hate the Primarchs, and the Emperor is fake, like the Wizard of Oz? These insane revelations and more are from the new short story The Carrion, Lord of the Imperium, the final story in Era of Ruin, so the final story in the Horus Heresy. And I have to say, as a Warhammer 40k fan for over 37 years now, I was totally blown away by some of the things in this very short but very crucial tale. The Carrion, Lord of the Imperium may just be the most important piece of Warhammer lore we've gotten in years, possibly ever. Told as a series of journal entries by the Adeptus Custodes Diocletian, one of the 300 companions of the Emperor of Mankind, we get a glimpse into the mind of the Guardians of the Emperor, and the revelations are staggering. For as loyal and unable to deviate from the Emperor's intentions for him as he is, Diocletian Koros has his own thoughts, his own will, and his own agendas. Still within the confines of what the Emperor did to him genetically to create him, and uplift him into an immortal warrior of the throne, but nonetheless, this story shows us the Custodes are their own individual selves in ways that not even the regular humans of the Imperium are. Dio, as his friends call him, is very close with Ra, Amun, Khan, which is what the Custodes call Constantine Valdor, Xerxes, and others of the first handful of Custodes. He's been there since the very, very beginning, taken as a youth to be perfection incarnate, and turned into an immortal space demigod by the Emperor. Dio gives us a glimpse of when everything went super bad, super quick. But it comes down to the creation of the Primarchs. For when the Emperor decided to undertake the Primarch and Astartes projects, he consulted his companions, those Custodes which he deemed fit to be more than mere advisors, as all the 10,000 were, but those chosen to be his inner circle. A practice that would later damn the galaxy when his sons emulated him, as the Primarchs, especially Horus, allowed warrior lodges and secret societies to flourish throughout the legions, which is how chaos crept in. And the last of the Custodes which he heard from was Dio, and Dio thought to himself that it was a terrible, terrible idea. All of the Custodes did. They knew it was a situation where warp juice was being spilled and dark pacts were being made. Dio knew, as all the companions did, that the Custodes should be leading the Emperor's forces on the Great Crusade to conquer the galaxy. But remember, this is taking place during the end of the unification of Terra. The Techno-Barbarians have yet to be fully quelled, and the Thunder Warriors are the shock troops of the day. And the Custodes want to lead human troops in the Emperor's name, not abhuman genetically modified super soldiers, but regular men and women. They know that it is what would be most impactful, and know that the Primarchs and the Astartes the Emperor plans to make are going to ruin everything. But only Dio says his own personal truth, that despite what he may think, despite what he wants or knows to be true, he feels the Emperor is going to do it anyway. So what's it matter? He just shrugs basically and says, "You're going to do it anyway. What's it matter if I approve or disapprove?" And that's the last guy to speak out of 300 dudes. 299 already said, "This is a very bad idea." It shows what kind of guy Dio is, and why he was raised to Tribune after the death, or rather disappearance, of Ra Endymion. He says his truth, and he says what they're all thinking but not saying, which is just baffling to me. I had no idea that the Custodes had that sort of autonomy of thought. Funny enough, this story also shows that they have emotion as well, including doubt, sorrow, and even joy, though it is the emotional spectrum of an immortal being. And that is a real big theme in this story, immortality. And we get to see how the Custodes see themselves when it comes to that, and they know that they are not able to die of old age, ever. They were truly master-crafted, individually, and built to last. One scientist studied a Custodes' blood for her entire mortal lifetime, and there was zero change in it at all. They age to the optimum age, and then they're good from there, which they feel sets them aside from lesser beings, which to them includes Primarchs, who are not meant to last, but to do a job and then perish. And Astartes, who are just mass-produced and inferior as far as the Custodes are concerned. But this story takes us through different eras, and one in particular we see is Guilliman ruling as Lord Regent of the Imperium. And he's giving some speech and bloviating, just pouring on the G-Man charisma and all that, and Diocletian is just thinking about literally killing him. He's thinking to himself that Guilliman needs to shut up, and if he's gonna say one more douchey thing, that he's gonna shank the Primarch, even though it will totally start some major shit. Dio's come to the point where he's heard enough, and he isn't fully confident that he can refrain from destroying the Primarch. And then Guilliman speaks to him directly, sort of snapping him out of the state he was in, and he says one thing, but we get the thoughts that he wishes he could say. And they are spicy. I mean, the Banana Boys are capable of keeping some hot tamales under those conehead hats of theirs. Diocletian Koros hates Guilliman. He sees him as an affront to everything that is holy, as inferior, both as an idea and genetically, and he only sees treachery waiting to happen when he looks at the Primarch. He scoffs at the idea of a Primarch leading the Imperium, as they are all prone to corruption, as half of them fell to chaos, and even the ones who didn't acted like toddlers arguing over who was more deserving of their father's attention. especially Guilliman and Dorn. It was a real revelation to read this, to know that the Imperium's balanced on a fine blade, and the Custodes hate Guilliman and want to take him out, just out of principle. Yes, the Custodes are exceptionally jealous of the Primarchs and of the Astartes, as they are imperfect beings who are more likely to mess things up than set them straight. Yet they get all the glory, get to lead the fight in the crusade, while the Custodes are the unsung heroes. Dio wants to know where Guilliman was when Terra burned, when the Emperor died on the Vengeful Spirit. He wants to know where Guilliman and the 13th Legion, the Ultramarines, were during the war in the Webway, and why they weren't even told about it. He wants to know why, if Guilliman was so trusted, if he's the true heir of the Imperium, why he wasn't even told of the Webway project. And he wants to know why Guilliman considers the Emperor his father and feels loss for him. He goes on that Guilliman should only feel the loss of the scientist who created him, as he is no son of the Emperor of mankind, but an abomination whose true fathers are in the warp, and are overcome with joy that he and his brother Primarchs are doing a good job. He is calling out, if only in his thoughts, the gods of chaos as the true fathers of the Primarchs. He sees them as basically greater demons and rejects the notion that the Emperor put his own power, if even a shard of it, into each Primarch. He does, however, weigh this over and realize that maybe each one does carry a shard of the Emperor, as each one is a stubborn, imbecilic, childlike figure who, despite being gifted with 1,000 IQ, can hardly tie their shoes. And those are traits of emperors and kings, that each of the Primarchs is a mini-emperor, and that is why they cannot and will not ever get along or agree. Dio knows they are beyond help and just wants to slay Guilliman out of principle. But since the Custodes are perfection made flesh, and they live forever, we get to see him in the modern setting of Warhammer 40,000, ostensibly. And since he is the Tribune of the Adeptus Custodes, we are treated to something that only he can see, or only he has access to. And this is the perfect way to end the entire Siege of Terra, and indeed the Horus Heresy, with the final scene. Now, Dio is a dreamer. He has dreams and knows that since he does, the Emperor intended that for him, as none of his other brothers do. And he's plagued by the visions he has sometimes, but sometimes he shrugs them off as just his subconscious, getting some rest and wandering, etc., like dreams are for us. Though it must be said that he's probably seen the end of the Imperium and the death of humanity in his dreams. And the Tribune goes to the throne room, and we see the giant corpse emperor looking like he does in the classic John Blanche artwork. Tubes and wires hooked up to a huge space lich who is connected to a massive machine whose size defies all explanation. It is so enormous. But that is all a fake. A show for the masses. Diocletian goes into a very secret door that only he has access to. He has to surrender a drop of his own blood to get the door to open, as it only responds to the blood of the Tribune of the Adeptus Custodes, and it still takes an hour for all the locks and mechanisms to open. And when he goes inside, we get to see the real Emperor. It's like the Wizard of Oz, sort of. The fake out for the people, and the real space wizard in the back hiding, but he really is dead, or undead. Dio is unsure which, and he's just a skeleton in a chair. The Golden Throne is just a regular chair for the most part, and looking upon the God Emperor, Dio knows he is not alive anymore, yet not dead, and knows that the power sustaining him is all the psychers they feed him, and that his hunger is ever growing. It dawns on Dio that the Emperor enjoys the feast, which according to the book Cypher Lord of the Fallen is thousands of psychers per minute now, rather than per day. It's a literal industrialized process at this point. And following throughout the whole story, we see that Dio is aware of what the Emperor is. He knows that he is serving the galaxy's ultimate evil, that what sits in that chair, the withered husk of a corpse, is holding back the Dark King. And inevitably, the throne will fail, or the Emperor will die, or both, and the birth of the primordial annihilator will shatter the galaxy and the Imperium. Dio knows that the being that gets all that worship, that is proclaimed as a god, is fallible, that he should have listened to his true perfect creations, his Custodes, and never made the Primarchs. He kicks himself for not having been able to stop Horus from slaying the Emperor, for the state of the Emperor on the throne, for the state of the Imperium, for how the galaxy became a cesspool of superstition and devolved into the stagnation of the current Imperium. And though the Custodian thinks all this to himself, though he knows that he is eternally bound to serve that which he holds in contempt, and will do so loyally without hesitation, he still lays his weapon at the feet of his king and asks the Emperor one question: "Do you dream, my lord?" And that is how the entire Horus Heresy ends, with a Custodian who sees through all the bullshit, who's been there from the very beginning and is still around even when Valdor is not, asking a simple question: "Do you dream?" I think he knows the answer, and knows the Emperor's existence is a perpetual nightmare. He is suffering physically in ways that cannot be measured, and his psyche is fractured like a shattered mirror, but the vampiric hunger, the galactic scale thirst he has for the souls of psychers, even Dio knows that is something absolutely evil. He ultimately knows that good or evil, right or wrong, savior or extinctor of mankind, whatever the Emperor is, was, chooses to be, or is becoming, it's all irrelevant. For whatever the case may be, he's bound by both sorcery and technology, by the Emperor's will and his own genetics, to serve eternally. His loyalty is incapable of faltering, but that doesn't mean he cannot see clearly exactly what it is he's loyal to. Dio knows the nature of the God Emperor better than probably anyone. He has access to the real throne when nobody else does. He knows the darkness that the Emperor is merely the avatar of, and his mind is disdainful of that. Yet it is who he is, who he was made to be. Dio knows the darkest secrets of the Imperium, but unlike anyone else, he's equipped not only to keep them, but to keep his own sanity in doing so. For if anyone has looked deep into the abyss and seen the truth in the void, it's Diocletian. But we can derive from this that Constantine Valdor holds many of the same opinions, and that he is privy to at least as many truths when it comes to the Emperor. For we do know that Valdor mostly considered the Primarchs to be unworthy man-children, whose petty squabbling among one another was capable of sundering empires. He did finally accept Rogel Dorn though, but that was after they'd been through quite a lot together, and their bro-off moment consisted mostly of a few "you still suck, but not quite as bad as I thought" comments. The Custodes serve a being they know is going to destroy mankind eventually, but is all that is holding it together at the moment. They saw firsthand what the Emperor can and will become, and it sounds like they have a contingency plan in place for every possibility. One thing is for sure, it would be awesome if the Custodes turned on Guilliman and kicked off another civil war. So what implications does this have for the King in Yellow storyline? In my opinion, this makes it that much more likely that the King in Yellow is actually Constantine Valdor. And we have 100% confirmation that Custodes can hate the Emperor they serve, or at least view him as the totally evil space lich that he is. Interesting that while they cannot disobey him, they're still free to hate him, to feel what they want to about him, and about the Imperium, the Crusade, and what they're doing. In my opinion, this doesn't change much, but it changes everything. It gives us concrete, solid proof that the Emperor that humanity gets to see is a fake, an effigy, a puppet to gawk at and pray to and worship. Dio hates hearing all the prayers, the constant worship, the adoration of the faithful. He knows the whole religion is a lie, that there's no happy afterlife at the Emperor's side for those who die, only a terrible, hellish existence in the warp as you're consumed by and tortured by demons for eternity. So yeah, we finally get a real good look behind the curtain. And let me say, I am absolutely impressed by how truly dark it is. Yeah, sure, it's grim too, let's not forget that. But Warhammer 40k just reminded us that it is the darkest setting out there. I give this story a 9 out of 10. It was a wonderful way to wrap up the series and ends on a total banger. The insights alone are worth the read. And even though it is only an hour long in audiobook, I feel like there's more lore in there than most full-length Warhammer novels. I mean, there are ramifications that ripple throughout the setting with every sentence practically. But the ultimate moment for me, even beyond the scorn for Guilliman being revealed, is the fake Emperor revelation and the true Emperor just basically being a rotted husk in a plain chair, hidden from view of everyone, just sucking down souls like there's no tomorrow. What do you think? Are these revelations truly meaningful, or are they like the Custodes' opinion of the Primarch project? There, but going to be ignored. We've heard it rumored for years that the Emperor is hidden and the guy on the throne people see is actually just a statue. So it is amazing to see that confirmed and absolutely true, instead of just something we can speculate on. Oh yeah, and it was also finally confirmed that even though he's claimed it to be the case sometimes, the Emperor did not, in fact, have a hand in creating the Golden Throne. I love when Warhammer 40k lore hits me with a left hook I just didn't see coming and I'm seeing stars. It really is what makes this setting so great, and one I've been coming back to over and over again for going on 40 years. You know what? All that said, let's bump this one up to a 10 out of 10. To say it absolutely delivered is a true statement, and though I was reluctant before, I have to be honest with myself. The Carrion Lord of the Imperium is as good as it gets. Aaron Dembski Bowden knocked it out of the park. Highly recommended, inquisitorial approval for the Emperor. The death of Sanguinius wounded reality itself, leaving a void that could never be filled within the hearts and souls of his sons. But what the tragedy did to their minds may just be one of the most grimdark things in Warhammer 40k. We've had glimpses over the years, and seen what the Blood Angels go through in the 40k timeline when they fall to the Black Rage. But what about during the Heresy, when Sanguinius died? Thanks to the short story Angels of Another Age by John French, from Era of Ruin, we get a good look at just that moment. And it gets really, really dark. I had to listen to it twice to make sure I had indeed heard what I heard the first time. And honestly, it just made it better. If you can't tell, I really liked this one. The Wasteland takes names, just like it takes everything else. Out of ammo, killing with sword alone for what seems like forever, in his mind at least, Ghilan, the Blood Angel, somehow endures. In an apocalyptic hellhole that used to be recognizable as Terra, the Solar War is in its final moments. They fought for weeks, and the bodies are stacked to the sky in some places. The sky is ochre, as is the ground. The air is thick with dust. Ghilan is with two other survivors, which they note is the exception, not the norm, to still live. The White Scar, Suluk, has a chain glaive that is jammed and has broken teeth. It doesn't work at all anymore, except as a club, basically. And Naren has a mace that hangs in his one arm. The other side of his body is a blackened ruin. Charred skin and broken bone protrudes from destroyed, cracked armor. He's barely holding on to life, missing his left arm from the shoulder down, which really says something because Imperial fists are excellent with shoulder awareness and protection. They're in what used to be Marmak South, a series of hab blocks for the human historians who studied the Great Crusade, turned into a string of artificial cliffs by the War Masons, set with crenellations and gun emplacements. It was the front line days before, but has been long since overrun. Now the whole line is rubble. Hold Point 78, as it was designated, is now a smoking crater, and jagged metal support beams poking out of the ground. Nothing really remains, claimed, like everything else in this story, by the Wasteland. Ghilan only knows where they are because of a carving that he sees on one of the ruins still with a bit standing, and there's a compass basically pointing north so he can place where they are. Suluk asks him if he knows their location. Ghilan remembers being there before, part of the southern Marmak's line. That places them several hundred meters from where they had been fighting, but they basically all realize that the warp has been messing with Terra, and the battle's raging upon it. This is the Wasteland. Time, space, and distance no longer mean what they once did here. One moment they were behind the main defenses, holding the line, and the next they were back in the Wasteland, behind enemy lines, finding themselves within the wreckage of their own past. Ghilan remembers his brother who had died at that spot. The Wasteland was full of dead angels. The sky is rust, hazy, and blends into the horizon. Gillen is imagining writing, and Sulik asks him what he was doing, questioning his sanity. A brush dipping into ink over and over. Sulik is blood-covered and helmetless. His face and hairline are caked with dried blood too. He looks like he's exactly where he is and what he is, a veteran of the most massive conflict imaginable to the human mind, struggling to hold on to life in the aftermath of civilization. The Imperial Fist in Aaron comes back from keeping watch. His eye lenses are cracked, his helmet nearly as wrecked as his body, but he saw something, and he knows it's coming for them, or at least toward them. They're wandering aimlessly in the wasteland, in the final moments of the greatest battle that humanity had ever seen. It seems quiet, even though it is not. Time is meaningless, and they notice that nearly everything they see is ruination, and bodies as far as the eye can see. Just total destruction. Literally billions of dead litter the field. The Eternity Gate has closed. Horus is ascendant, and Titans are striding through the ruins that were once cities. Billions continue fighting on, outside the defenses, waiting to die, but continuing to defy the traitors. Gillen keeps muttering fragments of ancient poetry, and Sulik notes that the Blood Angels are funny about being all about the arts, even to the White Scars who are consummate poets themselves. He asks if all the Blood Angels are high-minded poets. Gillen replies that some of them are painters. They have a good laugh. Then they see movement in the distance. 640 meters out, they see something moving towards them. Gillen and his friends make their stand. They just see this rippling dust cloud bearing down on them, not knowing what it is, but readying their weapons. Only Gillen has a power weapon, otherwise they only have the broken chain glaive and the one-armed dude with the mace. Gillen just focuses on poetry, as he watches Terra itself dying. He goes to speak, and then he's struck, suddenly, as he feels his father, Sanguinius, the great angel, die aboard the vengeful spirit. He sees blood falling in the dark far away. Blood and feathers. Then his comm system crackles to life, and the voice of Baron comes into his ears. They were far away, but with the augmentation their helmets provided, the two Blood Angels were able to see each other through the distance. Across fields of dead bodies heaped up into small mountains, the two beheld one another as they spoke, as their father died. It was dawn, and the clouds and dust had peeled back to reveal the blue of the sky. Gillen starts tripping immediately. He sees blue skies, smells calming smells, instead of all the bodies and burning wreckage. Feels at peace, just completely feeling calm for a brief moment, reminiscing about growing up on Baal with Baron. He contemplates how the war had redefined eternity, just like everything else. How he and Baron were both patched into the command network and knew that the mainline attacks were going to continue in perpetuity. That it meant the enemy would keep coming until they were all dead, or they broke through. He's basically in a delusional state, knowing that a massive attack is imminent and it is only a matter of time before he dies. 3 Marines in the aftermath of the greatest apocalypse of all time, wandering in the wasteland as the warp is consuming the solar system itself, and the War Master's forces are on the cusp of taking the throne world, or the ruin that is left of it. And the strongest that remains, the most capable, the one with the functioning weapon, has completely checked out. He's off in La La Land, tripping down memory lane, so traumatized by Sanguinius' death that he snapped immediately, not even registering that he's in a grief-induced hallucinatory state. And he knew that there were not enough legionnaires to hold the line. Each one was spread out far from the others, as the Blood Angels had dispersed throughout the defenders to lead them in the battle, as it was inspiring for the regular humans to fight beside the Emperor's angels. There would be 1 Space Marine for every 10,000 humans, sometimes even less Marines than that. They were there to make sure the orders were followed, and integrity maintained, etc. But most of all, they were there to make sure that they were seen, that the war cries of Baal were heard, for they were Astartes, and had the Emperor's blood. They were there to inspire as much as anything else. But it was that clear dawn that came, even as the Emperor faced his once favored son, that allowed Gillen to see far enough to behold the next line adjutant over. Then at that moment, the Vox crackled with a human officer claiming that an attack was incoming. And that is when Gillen really feels what he's been struggling with. Sanguinius has fallen. He knows it to be true, and he knows Horus did it. He knows that the regular humans of the Imperium and everyone else will know it eventually, but to him, it's a physical fact. The bond between Primarch and Space Marine was beyond the flesh. It was something of the soul. And for the Blood Angels in particular, their bond with their Gene Father was probably the strongest of all. And for Ghilan, it was a blackness, with white edges of pain tearing through him. He tasted blood. He was in darkness, falling, swearing denials into the void that it cannot be, that Sanguinius cannot be dead. He starts seeing the brush and the ink again, but now the ink is red. He sees a crimson smear across white, then total blackness and the revelation that he's dead. The black flashes to white, and then he's back, standing as he was, looking at the ochre wave rippling towards him. Some enemy charging from afar, kicking up a thick dust cloud, so obscured that Ghilan couldn't see what it was, but it came nonetheless. Soon he realized that what they were, as they oozed towards him, are demons. Red glossed skin, smoke fuming from them, roaring as they come. Sulek shouts. Naren is bracing for impact, his mace ready to smash some heads, despite the fact he's basically half a Marine and on his last leg with one arm and a charred left side. Ghilan sees none of it, as he feels his heart's being ripped out, having memories that never happened, more ink on canvas. Then he's in this moment of total calm, peace, standing on pale stone under a wooden canopy. He's totally lost it. He's noting the stone he's standing on is from an ancient mountain that was used to create ancient temples on Terra to the old gods of long-gone civilizations. And the pillars of the building he finds himself on are stone too, but a specific one from Caliban, gifted as giant pillars to Terra by the lion himself. Rain was pouring down outside the canopy. He's watching petals from the many blossoms of the gardens surrounding the building as they dance in pools in the rainfall. This is all in his mind, but he's obviously totally checked out. He realizes that he's in the past, fallen from pain into the past, a moment he's already lived through. He's in the gardens of Hate and Akia, when he was permitted to check them out with 100 of his brothers when the Great Angel first came to Terra. He was among the honor guard of Sanguinius then. The 100 spent their time in the garden creating great works of art to give to the Primarch. Ghilan wrote a poem and Baron had been a painter. He recalls Baron painting, and the memory of Baron turns to him and states, "I am dead." Almost as if it were a question, but definitely a statement. That's when Ghilan agrees and tells Baron that, "Yeah, you died on the line at Marmak South 3 weeks before." Baron frowned and asked if he died well. Ghilan recalled the Death Guard coming for them and Baron charging into a group of them who cut him down with axes and literally tore him apart. "You died well," Ghilan said. It was heroic but horrific and most certainly extremely painful. Ghilan didn't want to share the details of all that, even with his memory, or whatever vision he was having. "I died in the past. I died in an age of sorrow and betrayal and bitterness," Baron said. The whole time he's painting, and what he's putting on the parchment is ochre in color and swirling. It becomes clear that what Ghilan is seeing in his dead brother's painting is what is really happening. It is what is going on around him, in the wasteland. Baron paints yellow, and a yellow fog creeps across his painting, and ostensibly across the wasteland. "I died knowing that the Imperium that we believed in would never be as it was." Baron started painting red. Suddenly Ghilan realized he's not looking at a picture, but at the south line of the Marmak. The Death Guard were coming closer, obscured by a cloud of flies. "I died as an angel of a past age," Baron's voice said. Ghilan felt the dust and poison gas roll over him, but perceived that as a wash of watercolors, as Baron was painting within his memories, or visions, or hallucinations. It isn't clear how Ghilan is perceiving this as he's caught up in it. Then he's there, in that moment when Baron died, seeing it happen again, seeing the Death Guard butchering him in the rubble, seeing Baron's heroic charge and seeing how it ended, a moment that most likely saved his own life. Baron's heroics are on full display, and he totally slaughters many of the human troopers accompanying the Death Guard, and it gets brutal. Lots of blood, like Evil Dead amounts of blood, just hucking buckets of red-dyed corn syrup right at the camera lens. Then Ghilan is looking at the moment as if it is the painting again. He doesn't know what's what at all. Seeing the enemy firing at Baron as white flashes on the canvas. He sees the death of Baron as a still image, as the painting of Baron himself. "I died. I do not have to live with the future that is to come. Then he falls again, through white instead of black. And he's back in reality, or what he feels is reality, but who knows at this point, the guy's all over the place. And he feels a searing pain in his arm. He's screaming, shouting, the sound pouring from inside him. He's totally destroying an enemy as he comes to, smashing through a skull with his sword and splattering gore everywhere, just like a blood angel should. He finds himself surrounded by demons, bloodletters by the description of them. The war, the last battle of battles, Ghilan realizes, has worn the barrier between reality and the warp so thin it has turned Terra itself into a demon world. A realization he has even as he cuts the demons down with his sword. He wades out into the tide of demons away from Holdpoint 78, into the ochre sea of dust and blades. He notes he's alone. He cannot hear Sulik or Naren, but isn't putting together why. If they are calling to him from the Holdpoint, he cannot hear it. The demons start laughing at him, and the laugh is the sound of claws shredding feathers from an angel as it dies. Ghilan cuts the demon down, then the next, then the next. Swords cut into his armor, but he doesn't let it slow him down. He wades deeper into the tide of demons, his blood pouring out and mixing with the ground. He feels it again, realizing his father is dead. He feels the claws tearing at his hearts, falling into the maw of oblivion. Yeah, this story is written rather poetically, which is appropriate. And the thoughts run through his head that Sanguinius is dead. Ghilan is dead. The blood angels are dead. There is nothing else. He finds himself in a world that is cold, where only black and red exist. A sort of quasi-death state, it seems. And again, Baron speaks to him. It is better that I fell when I did. Ghilan is struck in the side by one of the black blades of the demons. It cuts through his armor, leaving a horrific wound in his side. The pain is excruciating, but it just disappears into the abyss that is now inside him. I will always be as I was. I will not live with what you must, Baron says. The demon's sword pulls away from Ghilan's side, tearing free of him and exposing a wound much worse than Ghilan thought. A mortal wound, but Ghilan notes that he's already dead. He cuts the demon in half, the pieces fall, and Ghilan is still in the world of black and red. He then sees a bed of white feathers painted with the red of life as the power field on his sword fails. He turns just as a flesh hound leaps at him, and he jams his blade down its throat and out the back of its skull. The momentum of the hound impaling it so hard that the blade goes all the way through the skull and out the back of the neck where it hits the flesh hound's brass collar and makes it ring like a shattering bell. The hound tears into his shoulder, through his pauldron as it dies, but he doesn't even feel the pain of it at all, as he's literally a storm of pain and grief. He's despair itself, and even the pain of his mortal wounds are meaningless. The next line is one of the greatest quotes in Warhammer possibly. The future is murder, here in the wasteland, where angels are corpses, and rage drowns out all. He cuts 3 more demons down. He's covered head to toe in demon ichor. He becomes aware that Holdpoint 78 is very far away now, and looks to be getting smaller. He wonders if Naren and Sulik still stand there. He wonders if it was their voices that he heard, calling above the roars of the demons. Yet at this point he's not remembering one moment from the next, and seems to be flipping through hallucinated realities rapidly, bouncing back and forth, as real-world dire events, including his own demise, are playing out all around him and about him. He goes deeper into the tide of demons. He hears the voices of Baron, Sanguinius, his brothers, all calling him from beyond the grave. He wonders what sort of limbo he's caught in, wondering if the wasteland is an afterlife of sorts. If he's alive or dead, and if he's alive, will he be stuck in that hellish nightmare for eternity? Just the wasteland and the demons, a never-ending tide of them, a battle he must fight in perpetuity. He continues to bleed out, his sword now broken, but he doesn't stop the slaughter. Demons fall all around him, though his body is in ruins. He fights on as the story ends, shedding demon blood, spilling it into the ochre dust, going on and on, slaying his way into the horizon. So, this story is epic. I have to say that it is extremely immersive and really gives you the feel of someone experiencing a dissociative episode, or a series of episodes actually. The death of Sanguinius and the Black Rage are much different than we thought. On some level, they're operating in a way that seems perfectly rational. But okay, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. He killed his friends. Gillen cut down Naren and Sulik both and didn't even know he did it. I think this whole story is to show us how far gone the Blood Angels get because of their father's death. The Black Rage hits them like a freight train, and it is crippling on 1,000 different levels. But mostly it destroyed their mind and ability to reason completely, and replaces it with a series of remembrances and recollections of past battles and horrifying loss. I do believe that, like many Death Company Blood Angels on the tabletop, this guy didn't last too long after this. But yeah, it is pretty obvious that he killed his friends, even as he is wandering and wondering where they are and why they're not helping him. For all we know, there never even were any demons, just him butchering his friends who had survived the wasteland with him for weeks. It makes the loss of Sanguinius so much more tragic, and the way it affected his sons just seems to be horrifying. It goes so far beyond just seeing visions of Horus slaying Sanguinius. In many ways, the Death Company seemed to have a connection to the world of the dead, with one foot still in the realm of the living. I really enjoyed this story. No huge reveal, no crazy twist, just seeing what it was actually like to fall to the Black Rage. And it is insanity on every level. Makes me feel even worse for the Blood Angels. The way it came back to painting and paintbrushes and rinsing out brushes in the water of the paint and ink in them. How it rhymed like a poem, and how it blurred the lines between past, present, and future, as well as the lines between memory, thought, hallucination, and reality, all in the context of the warp taking Terra over. It was really well done. It was extremely meta, as I felt the author was telling me to go paint my Blood Angels in 1,000 different ways. This was a horror story, and a psychological thriller. I love how the supreme act of betrayal that we know happened, the butchery of his companions, who he'd survived with through everything that had happened, as rare as that was, it was not even overtly stated, but we know what happened. I myself am not even sure that there ever were any bloodletters, or if there were, they may have been laughing as they watched the crazed Blood Angel slaughtering loyalist and traitor alike, indiscriminately, as he pondered poetry and painting in his mind. Gillen, you are Tyler Durden. The painting that you keep seeing Baron working on is yours, and you're painting it with the blood and entrails of your friends as the loss of your gene father tears your soul apart and shatters your mind. The wasteland itself, and how it is explained as a condition of reality, not a description of it, is in its own way a character of its own. Terra has never seemed so grim. Barren desolation for untold distances, the entire planet touched by the horrors of the warp on some level. It was truly grimdark, and occurring even as the Emperor fought Horus Lupercal aboard the Vengeful Spirit, as the traitors were set to breach the Inner Sanctum, and as Vulcan was set to activate the Talisman of Seven Hammers and destroy the throne world itself to deny Horus. This is pure grimdark, and I hope they keep up this sort of bleak, hopeless feel with the setting as they lean harder into the Horus Heresy game. I may have just liked this story the most of all out of the shorts in Era of Ruin. Let me know what you thought of it, if you read it, in the comments.